Meet the Volkswagen ID.Buzz, also known as the electric version of the modern Kombi. And today we get to drive it more than a year before it's due in Australian showrooms. In this video, we'll tell you what it's like to drive, go through the key features, and ask the question, should you buy one? Let's get started. German car giant Volkswagen has been toying with the idea of a Kombi comeback for the better part of 2 decades, since it remade a modern version of the iconic Beetle in the late 1990s. And finally, 5 years ago, Volkswagen's vision of a reborn Kombi was unveiled at the 2017 Detroit Motor Show as an electric car. At the time, fans wondered if electric power was the right call, and the concept was met with mixed reactions from baby boomers who grew up with the original hippie-mobile. Drive was invited with other international media to sample the Volkswagen ID.Buzz 5-seat short wheelbase in a range of driving conditions on impeccable European roads. So we will reserve final judgment until we test it in Australia in the bump and grind of familiar territory. In the meantime, this is our first taste of the ID.Buzz ahead of local showroom arrivals by this time next year, when it is expected to be sold alongside the ID.Buzz cargo delivery van version due about the same time. Nevertheless, our test drive experience provided some useful insights, good and bad, for anyone holding out for one of these. Price is yet to be announced, but by our calculations, using European pricing as a guide, the ID.Buzz is expected to cost in excess of $100,000. Prices and specifications for the ID.Buzz range will be released closer to local arrivals. Helpfully, the rear sliding doors can be opened or closed at the press of a button and are more convenient in tight parking spaces than doors that open outwards, especially when loading kids in and out of the car. The back seat split folds 60/40 and can slide forward and back and recline. However, they can't be removed, and there is a step up from the load floor even when the back seats are stowed. The interior of the ID.Buzz is really spacious, and as you might expect, given the proportions of the vehicle, you do sit really high up. You've got a fantastic view of the road ahead, and I really love the upright design of the windshield because it gives you a lot more shade, which is great in summer. A couple of other key features: there's a really large storage tray here. The smartphone pocket is just near the driver, next to 2 USB-C charge ports. We've got a pretty convincing fake wood grain trim across the dash, and like all the electric cars we've driven from Volkswagen to date, there's a large infotainment screen and a small digital display for the speedometer and the instrument cluster. A couple of other points. Regular viewers will also know we've criticised heavily the Volkswagen infotainment system. These tabs here for the air conditioning controls do not illuminate at night, nor does the volume control. So it's really frustrating to operate on the move, even during the day, but especially so at night. Now, Volkswagen is working on an update for that. We've also criticised the touch pads on the steering wheel, and they're not physical buttons. And again, it's not as easy to locate with your thumb or your fingertip while you're driving. Those criticisms aside, it's a really comfortable driving environment. Adjustable armrests for the driver and front seat passenger. As you might expect, there is an abundance of space in here. The driving position's really comfortable. There's plenty of storage, including this nice center console here, these drop-down drink holders, and we've got 3 layers of storage in the door pockets, just like a lot of commercial vans. One of my common criticisms with modern cars, short sun visors. They're not long enough to block side glare because the sun visors themselves are shorter because all the packaging around the rear view mirror these days is very bulky. There's a lot of safety tech in there, so that's made these guys shorter, and that's why we end up with these gaps. Once again, plenty of room in here. Power-operated sliding doors on both sides of the car. Plenty of room for 3 adults across the back here. We expect Australian-delivered versions will have 2 ISOFIX child seat mounts in the outer positions and perhaps a top tether for the centre position. That's yet to be confirmed, but that's our expectation. I've got plenty of knee room, plenty of foot room, plenty of shoulder room, and this handy table here, you can actually angle it to have it like so for an iPad or even at that angle, or you can put it in laptop mode or lunchbox mode and have it there for the kids. There's also a handy pocket here for a phone or any other junk you need to carry with you. And if your kids are prone to car sickness, they're probably not going to get car sick in the back here because the windows are massive. There's a fantastic view around you and you can really see where you're going and enjoy the drive. Frustratingly, for anyone who might be claustrophobic, in addition to the lack of rear air conditioning vents, the rear windows don't open up or down or horizontally. Roof-mounted air vents are available on the 7-seat long-wheelbase version of the ID.Buzz, above the second and third rows of seats. However, for now, it is unclear if roof-mounted air vents will be offered on the 5-seat short-wheelbase version introduced locally. The ID.Buzz, of course, has a massive cargo hold, although we did notice when you lower those rear seats, there is a step up from the cargo floor through to the rest of the load area. So it's not quite a flat load space when you do stow those second row seats. But look, there is a ton of room here to go away for the weekend. You are not going to be struggling for space. There's also a handy 12-volt power socket on that side of the car, and there's a retractable cargo blind. We're in one of the most hotly anticipated cars of this decade, the ID.Buzz, also known as the modern version of the Kombi. In case you've missed it, the modern Kombi has gone electric, and it's changed its name to ID.Buzz. Given how popular the original Kombi was with hippies, we're going to take a bet that the modern Kombi will also appeal to those who care about the environment, even if it is a 2.5-ton electric car. There's one thing you can't deny about the ID.Buzz: this thing is cool. It's turning a lot of heads, and it's getting a lot of thumbs up from other motorists. It's a really comfortable car to drive. You've got a tall, commanding driving position of the road ahead. It's in fact a bit taller than an SUV, so anyone who drives an SUV and is getting used to the height, well, guess what? You get another bump up if you jump into an ID.Buzz. This is what van drivers get to enjoy every day. Another perhaps odd observation, but because the windscreen pillars are so upright and it's kind of a box-shaped design, we've got a lot of shade in here, which is great to stay cool in summer. I really love the quality of the materials. You can see Volkswagen's put a lot of effort in here. Soft touch materials on the dash, a pretty convincing fake wood grain trim around the cabin, a high quality feeling steering wheel, and generally speaking, all buttons and dials are well placed and easy to use, with one exception: the infotainment system. Sorry to sound like a broken record, but a common criticism we have with the Volkswagen infotainment system is it's really fiddly to use. The buttons are not illuminated at night, which makes them even harder to use at night, and you do have to take your eyes off the road to just perform simple functions like adjust the air conditioning temperature or change radio stations. Even the steering wheels don't have physical buttons on Volkswagen cars anymore. It's just a big giant plastic tab you've got to run your finger or thumb over to try and find the control you need. It doesn't need to be this complicated. Although the wireless charging port isn't quite as cool as the one in the ID.3, which was in the center console, in the ID.Buzz it's up here in the dash and it is a little bit narrower. So if you do have a large phone with a bulky protective case, it might not fit in as easily, as is the case for me today. As with the upgrades to the infotainment system, which we hope are coming soon, we also hope Volkswagen's going to make these smartphone charging pads a little bit bigger, because phones are also getting bigger. Downsides: the ID.Buzz doesn't have a one pedal mode, so even in the most aggressive regenerative braking setting, it's not recouping as much energy as it could. So when you take your foot off the accelerator, it's not braking as heavily, and that means you're giving some energy away. And it has really good responsiveness, which should come as a big shock to anyone who's not driven an electric car before. Given we've been driving in a mountain range, the energy consumption's probably not indicative of what you're going to get in the real world, but we've seen it range from 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers to 24 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now that was when we were climbing. We've just descended quite a few hundred meters, or possibly even more than that, and we've picked up some range again. It's clear though that this car does use more than other electric cars, and that's partly because of the size and the weight, and also it's pushing a lot of air out of the way. This is a very large vehicle. It is unfortunately shaped like a brick, and bricks going through air at speed are not very aerodynamic. That said, for now we don't have anything to compare it to, so it could well be the case that the Kia EV9 is also up into the 20s or close to the 20s when it comes to energy consumption. However, we did feel it was worth pointing out you're not going to get the same energy efficiency as you would, say, in a Tesla Model 3 or a Model Y. First of all, they're the benchmarks in the class when it comes to energy efficiency, and secondly, they're smaller and lighter. I do love this car. What an absolute blast. Who would have thought an electric 5-seat van could bring so much joy? So, to sum up, the ID.Buzz looks cool, it's nice to drive, it's got plenty of driving range for most customers. The main reservations are this awful infotainment system and what it's going to cost in Australia. Early price estimates for the ID.Buzz in Australia are pegged at about $100,000 or more. While that's a lot of money for a Kombi, It's also the same amount of money that Kia wants to charge for the EV9. In Europe, there are two versions of the ID.Buzz, the short wheelbase 5-seater that we have here and the 7-seat long wheelbase. Volkswagen Australia says initially we're on target to get the regular 5-seat short wheelbase version, and the 7-seater may follow at a later date. So, should you buy the ID.Buzz? Well, if you've made it this far in the video, you've probably already made up your mind. If you're a fan of Kombi looks and you want to go electric, there really is no other choice. But if you're just looking for a large 5-seat electric van, it might be worth weighing up your options and comparing it to the Kia EV9 once we know more information on that car. In summary, how the ID.Buzz drives will be academic for most buyers who will fall in love with it on looks alone. Regardless of how you may want to tenuously justify buying a big, heavy 5-seat family car, there is finally an electric vehicle that pulls on your heartstrings as well as clearing your conscience. To read the full review on the Volkswagen ID.Buzz, go to Drive.com.au. Please hit like if you've enjoyed this video and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any future updates.